You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Everybody's working for the weekend or engaging for the weekend, John,
Yeah,
as you and I
I
are
am. Yeah,
engaging
I'm
for the
engaging
weekend.
for the weekend. Yeah. Hmm.
Absolutely. But all of you are here to listen to us engage with you and your comments because, as we say on our standard mission log, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode. And this is that
Mm.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Here we go.
So lucky you.
Yeah. So, yes, if you want to be like Chuck here, Chuck, who wrote into us all the way from Harrisburg, PA, with a question, which we will grapple with here. And this is what Chuck says. Says, I have been a very regular listener of your podcast for many years. In fact, I watch an episode in advance and generally listen while biking or walking. I'm a big fan. You have become part of my life and make me feel a little less lonely during these dark days of isolation. Wow. First of all, thank you for that, Chuck. Recently, I've been going for long walks late at night and catching up on the Next Generation movie podcast. I was listening to the First Contact commentary, which led to some thoughts that are making me less optimistic about our future. One of the topics of discussion is whether the world can unify without an outside influence to fight, i.e., whether we can come together on our own. Because of when I'm listening to this, I have had to come to the dark conclusion that the last year has taught me that this will never happen. I am increasingly pessimistic that even when we are fighting a threat to us all, like COVID-19, that we can unite. Too many of us, and I mean the US mostly, but not solely, are more interested in finger pointing, blame, and division than we are in fighting the common enemy. Please convince me I am wrong. Chuck.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's heavy, man.
that is. That is. I'll speak specifically to that podcast because that was an episode I did way back when. And the point in Star Trek First Contact was we've gotten through World War III and this nuclear holocaust, and then humanity is rebuilding itself, realizing that it needs to work together. And only then does that happen. Only then does warp drive come along. Only then do the Vulcans find us, and we realize that there is something else out there, and that it's all these events that have led humanity to come together. So that's the context there. And I posed it in that, which is a great, fun Star Trek movie. Generally, most people love that movie. That the darker context there is that we don't get to the Star Trek future until we go through nearly wiping ourselves out. And that is still a concern of mine. That is still a concern that I have about that movie, even as fun as that movie is. And Chuck is not wrong here that we have just gone through a struggle. We are still in a struggle, although it is less so right now as of this recording than it was a year ago. That should have been obvious and apparent to everyone because this didn't come from, this wasn't a person coming after us. This was a thing, this is a biological thing that affected everybody equally, or theoretically has, equal effect, equal threat to people. Mm-hmm. And we botched it. At the same time, and I say we botched it because there have been a lot of needless deaths, At the same time, what I hope is that the legacy of what we've been through is how our best and our brightest did come together to do what was needed in that dark time. You had the culmination of incredible technologies, incredible resources, and brilliant minds saying, here's what we can do when we work together. You had teams of scientists all over the world in different permutations, different kinds, some working for, commercial drug companies, some working for universities. I'm speaking off the cuff here, so I didn't prepare my answer, but I'm thinking to an article that I read about how as soon as the information about coronavirus was accessible, it took a team of students, something like 40 hours to map the genome
Mhm.
and then make that public to the people who needed it to work on it. So to me, this is all very hopeful stuff. It's not hopeful that we're still fighting over it. It's not hopeful to me that there's still a political element that is asinine and pointless. But it also shows me that there are people who know how to focus and do what is right for the greater good, even when there are people who are pushing back against that. So that's about the specific time that we are now, Chuck. But I'll also say, to sort of a bigger answer, maybe a more Star Trek answer, I'm hopeful we don't have to go through something again that is terrible. But I kind of like the idea. I've said it before that, if we get to a point that we discover a glimmer of an inkling of life somewhere else out there, even if it's a bacterium sitting on the back end of a really ugly asteroid that passes us by, great, because that tells all of humanity on this pale blue dot on which we sit that we're not it. We're not the only end all be all when it comes to life out there in the universe. And I think that is the paradigm shift that I hope for. Because we can say, look, here we are on this speck of dust fighting each other. There's more out there, you know?
I think that thank you, Chuck, for this. And there are no easy answers for where we are right now. From my experience, what I have learned to do is to try and seek out as much truth and fact as I can, because the airwaves are constantly being bombarded with manipulation strategies, either manipulation by religion or by politics or even by science itself. So find a source that you trust, verify that source, get the real information so that you can make the best informed decisions. That will give you, I think, just a better anchor and understanding and perspective on how to move forward with certain decisions in your life or in your community. But I still believe that eventually, if we hold on to hope with a plan, hope has to have a plan. There has to be several stages in order to achieve what we need to achieve in order to find this Star Trek future. It may not be exactly the same way as we think, because 56 years of believing in a certain way and format of how the future is going to work is also in and of itself a way of having been pre-programmed to think about how humanity is going to find its way into a more hopeful situation. There is a lot of hard work to be done. There's going to be a great deal of sacrifices involved. But at the same time, though, the best that we can do is to focus on the things that we can control in our lives. So if there's an organization or an outing or a gathering where you feel safe, where you can be with people of like minds, share information, have an open dialogue, don't close yourself off to certain things. If you feel strongly about saying certain things, find communities that can be supportive, because the isolationism of all of this is what's really most terrifying. Because in isolation, we start falling back on just the sheer fear of our thoughts, because we can't manifest those thoughts into other forms of dialogue. It's just we find the nth degree. It's kind of like going to WebMD and saying, I have a cold, then all of a sudden you find like the worst possible cancer related to cold.
Yeah.
That's not a logical pathway or a healthy pathway for any of this. And the energy that we build up inside ourselves, it can be toxic because we don't have any outlet for it. So I do believe that there is hope. I do believe that the humanity will sort itself out. But at the same time, though, each one of us individually has to do our due diligence and take responsibility for the information that we are putting out there and also receiving, and challenging that information with truth and fact and not hyperbole. And I think that that will go a long way into establishing a better pattern for information exchange, which I think is the most important way of moving forward.
Nicely said. And by the way, since I referenced it a moment ago, but without being specific about it, Pale Blue Dot, it was on my mind because it was Carl Sagan's birthday the other day as of our recording of this. And I'm going to drop a link into the show notes for this episode, because that is one of those things that, and we kind of do this when we talk about certain episodes of Star Trek. It's like a mental reset. you know the lesson already. You know the thoughts behind the moral meaning message, but then you see something played out dramatically, and it's like the mental reset that you need to go, yeah, I need to kind of keep that message in my heart. I feel the same way about Pale Blue Dot, because it makes the point to say, yeah, we fight, we have grievances, we have competing ideas and ideologies, but step back a moment and realize that we are insignificant on this tiny rock in an insignificant part of an unextraordinary galaxy. And to me, that doesn't make me feel small. It makes me feel sort of re-engaged to go, oh yeah, it's not all about the idea that I hold that is so important to me. It's actually about making the best of what we have right here, right now, in this slice of space that we have. So I'll post that as well. If you haven't seen it before, watch it. And if you have seen it before, hopefully you know what I'm talking about.
One last thought for me, though, John, in this whole equation is that it's the scene where Edith Keeler was addressing, the people in the soup kitchen, where she says that, one day we're going to harness the atom, and we're going to send rockets out to explore space and find a way to feed the hungry masses of the world. And these are the days worth living for.
Yeah.
That's like one of the most inspirational moments, I think, in the history of Star Trek, because you have a woman in the late 1940s who believes in something that she shouldn't have any real belief in because there's no proof, but there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Chuck, thank you so much. Let's keep this going, okay? Send us another note. Like all of you can. missionlog@roddenberry.com or on Facebook and Twitter @missionlogpod. And remember to subscribe and like and share this very playlist, Mission Log Engage, here at youtube.com/Roddenberry Entertainment. And we may engage with your comments on the air.